So maybe I came from that generation where, when I grew up, there was no internet, there was no nothing, there's no nothing available information-wise about people like us.
Right.
And so I think that I lived a life where I always felt this difference. I always experienced it from a young age, but our reality was so different than that. And I ended up living a life trying to mold myself into what I thought I should be.
Exactly.
Based on other people's expectations, family background, my upbringing, all that kind of stuff. And so I did not come to terms or did not, shall we say, leave the closet until I was in my early 50s. And I would say that in that time period, I did, I worked in information technology since the early 80s, since like 1980, believe it or not. And so because of that, I could see people express themselves in community, through all the incantations, before there's Facebook, there's message boards. Oh God, what was the other? Anyway, I don't want to go through that history, but the long story short is I used to live vicariously through others. I used to look at other trans people on, on the internet, on social, and I used to do it from the most intense relief from my own dysphoria, but yet at the same time being closeted for all those years, being closeted for so long, that took an enormous toll on me. I think on the other hand, to finally get that courage to take those first steps out of the closet, which is in this club scene that we mutually experienced, was like, oh my gosh, that was the most unbelievable experience ever. Because it's like, there's like this need. It's kind of like the need to me was almost like, a pitcher of water in a parched desert. All of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh. And for me to realize I think I was married for over 20 years, 24 years. And when I first came out to these trans clubs and trans events, it was like the emotions were overwhelming, and first to present as myself and even to learn, like even where I lived in, I lived in a community in Los Angeles, Torrance, which by its nature was kind of a little bit more conservative bedroom community. So all of a sudden to find out like, oh my God, there's people next door to me like me. I just couldn't even, it was. So I think it was just almost, in terms of my senses, to go to a club and freely express myself, and yes, with a lot of drinks. Oh my,
always helps.
That was powerful. It was, thankfully we had that venue to express ourselves.
Yes, I started with that club too, and I actually found the club by accident. Someone took me there, and then once I kind of like your situation, once I walk in, I just feel I belong here. Somehow I don't know why.
People like me.
Yeah, so that's why. Because Michelle just came out about 2 years ago.
Just over 2 years. At age 52.
Yes. And she's kind of the newer I'll call it newer generation transition girls. They don't actually have to go to those clubs.
Yes, I never did.
Yeah, I found we interviewed some. They are just recently came out, and they just transition and then headed to blend into the society.
I will
right
say,
away.
I've driven by Hamburger Mary's very slow a lot pre-transition.
Okay.
But I never went in, and I basically watched you guys online because I think in the 80s is when the advent of the internet and, able to have our own computers, and then watching other stories for those years, I think really saved my life because it gave me hope, even though I never thought I would transition based on my family, my career, my religious upbringing. But I was able to see that as actually possible, which helped me sustain and not end up unaliving myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. A very similar experience, maybe just a little bit different vehicle.
Right. So,
but, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to ask you because you mentioned about when you came out, you were still in a marriage. Can you
Yes.
share that experience? Because you say
Oh,
similarity. Michelle might be able
Yes.
to reflect.
Sounds
to
like we
your-
might have a
yeah,
lot in common with
yeah,
this.
on that part. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So, like I said, I was married for 24 years before I really got the courage to leave the closet.
Mhm.
And, I think, how did I do it? My wife at the time, who is now my ex, at the time, she was out of town for 3 or 4 weeks. And that's like, oh boy,
Yes.
I'm gonna
Me time.
try this out.
Yes.
I'm taking this for a test ride. And then all my friends and many of them, Shelby knows, but there was one lady who really encouraged me to leave the closet, who I'm forever indebted to her. It was the Emmy, who you know Emmy.
Wow.
And I think she said something to me when I was just closeted online, exploring myself, and it never left me. She's like, what's going to be, what are you waiting for? And what's going to be your excuse next month?
Right.
And it's like, oh my God.
Yes.
So my wife was out of town at the time, and I took the opportunity to, engage a makeup artist, help with clothing, present, do the whole event, come back home. And, I think the way, once you do an act like that, you present in public for the first time with the gender to which you identify or that you're figuring out, that is truly an irrevocable act. I didn't understand it at the time.
Right.
In terms of my relationship with my marriage is, when my wife at the time returned back from, being out of town, I got up that courage to express to her me at the time. And at the time I was just saying, oh, I'm just more of a cross-dresser. I need to do this on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I would say it's kind of for us, I desperately wanted to stay together with her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really, really, really wanted to make it work.